Welcome everybody to STEM and the environment. I am excited to present this to you with our fabulous speaker today. We are joined here with Andrew Brown from Weyerhaeuser, and we're going to talk about all the cool things in the world of environmental sustainability, policy, and all of that, forestry. So as we get started, we're going to go ahead and do a quick overview for about CEE, our organization here, just for you new friends. So CEE was founded in 1983 by Joanne DeGennaro and the late Admiral H.G. Rickover, who's the father of the nuclear navy and civilian uses of nuclear power. Our mission here at CEE is to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence and leadership in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, and to encourage international collaboration between and among leaders in the global community. CEE has 4 flagship programs that we are very proud of, first of which is RSI, the Research Science Institute. RSI is a highly competitive 6-week summer science and engineering program open to rising high school seniors. Juniors are eligible to apply. RSI is the first cost-free summer science and engineering program that combines on-campus coursework in scientific theory with off-campus work in science and technology research. Applications for 2026 RSI have not opened just yet, but they are coming down the line. So keep an eye out if you are interested in applying to RSI for the coming year. Next, we have US Biolympiad, or USABO. USABO is the premier U.S. biology education and testing program for high school students. It provides the motivation, curricular resources, and skills training to take students beyond their classroom experience to the level of international competitiveness. Since CEE began administering the USABO in 2003, every member of the USA Biolympiad team has medaled at the International Biolympiad. Last year we were in the Philippines, and this coming year it will be held in Lithuania. Applications to be a part of USABO to do the testing and to apply are open for USABO. If your school is not a registered USABO testing site or sponsor, you do need to speak to a teacher to become a part of USABO. It is through the school. So talk to your teachers if you are not sure if you are a USABO site. So next we have our 2 newest programs. We have the Teacher Enrichment Program, or TEP. TEP provides opportunities for middle and high school teachers to connect with leading experts from industry and academia, explore cutting-edge research and development, and make meaningful professional links with direct benefits for teachers and students. Finally, there's STEM Lyceums, which is this group here today. STEM Lyceums is a virtual club for high school students to meet once a month to learn about STEM career pathways from leading field experts. Industry professionals share cutting-edge research and offer unique learning experiences, like scholarships and internship opportunities for high-achieving students. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here for STEM Lyceums, and if you are interested in our other programs, please visit www.cee.org to learn more about US Biolympiad or RSI. If you are a teacher, you may also learn about TEP. And now I am happy to introduce our speakers. So today we are being joined by Andrew Brown. With nearly 20 years of experience in the forest industry, Andrew Brown is a dedicated forester with a deep love for the woods and a passion for sharing his knowledge with others. After graduating from Virginia Tech, Andrew began his career serving the citizens of Virginia as a county forester with the Virginia Department of Forestry, or the DOF. In 2014, he transitioned to forest industry to help Weyerhaeuser manage their forest lands. As an environmental manager with Weyerhaeuser, he currently oversees the company's Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI, certification for Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. In this role, Andrew helps foresters, loggers, and the public understand how sustainable forage management can be both profitable and environmentally beneficial. He also works closely with government agencies to demonstrate how effective forest management can enhance biodiversity and sustainability. Throughout his career, Andrew has consistently enjoyed sharing his passion for forestry, particularly with youth. Known affectionately as GOAT, he is a regular instructor at Camp Woods and Wildlife, where he has taught hundreds of students about the value of trees and forests. Camp Woods and Wildlife is a special place for Andrew because it's where he met his wife, Kelsey, of 10 years. His favorite student, though, is his 7-year-old son, Killian, who he teaches about trees every day on their walks through the woods with their dog, Smokey. Love the fact that your dog's name is Smokey. I can see the connection there. So thank you, Andrew, for joining us. I'm going to let you take over the presentation.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you very much for inviting me. I was checking out some of your former speakers, and I'm like, doctor of this, nuclear scientist, and I was trying to understand something what they said. I'm like, y'all lost me about at the introduction. So I'm real excited to be here, and it was funny as we were sitting here, talking about STEM and how it connects to the environment. I was like, oh yeah, trees have a stem too. That's just excellent. So, um, first thing, I'll tell you about myself is I am known by GOAT by probably more people than actually know me as Andrew. Anytime I teach students, especially out in the woods, I just tell them my name is GOAT, and they look at me strange, and they're like, "What's your real name?" I'm like, "GOAT," and I go on, and everybody's good. I do like some corny jokes, and we may or may not have any today, but we're going to have some fun. But real quick, just give you a brief rundown of what I'm going to talk about today. We'll just talk about how I got here. We're going to talk a little bit about sustainability because I hate using big words and not making sure we're all on the same page with them. Going to talk about how I leverage my STEM background to ensure a healthy forest ecosystem and make the right decisions on the forest land base. Probably talk a little bit about Weyerhaeuser, making connections, and then the day in the life of a environmental manager. But I'll start with a little bit, so the company I work for right now is Weyerhaeuser. Weyerhaeuser is one of the largest private landowners in the world, really, certainly in the United States. We use science, technology, and sustainable practices to grow and manage our trees, which are then used to build houses and homes and other products. Our work combines biology, engineering, and environmental science, and forestry is a lot of art too, right? I know this is a science, technology-minded bunch, but every day I'm in the woods and reminded that there is some art to this, right? It's not all numbers, but it's a great career, great job, and I'm excited to tell you all about it. We will have a few polls, so please feel free to throw questions in. I'm happy to answer anything I can. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how I got here. People often ask me, say, "Oh, you're a forester. What's a forester?" I'm like, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees." And that usually people understand that a little bit. But how did I get here for being, someone who speaks to the trees and helps manage this awesome resource? I grew up as a city boy. I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia. I, was spent time at Lake Fairfax out in the woods, sort of, but the woods outside of DC weren't much. But really had a love for nature for some time I spent overseas as a kid. So I decided I wanted to go to Virginia Tech. I wanted to study wildlife. That didn't work out because there were some courses there that just weren't going to fit with my abilities. So I got into forestry, loved it. Started my career working for the state, moved around, made a lot of friends, working as a county forester, helping people manage their timberlands, right? So a landowner would call me up, "Hey, I've got 5 acres, I've got 500 acres. What do I need to do with it?" I had to work with them, help them understand what their goals were and what they needed to do with it. Then got on with forest industry. So kind of a big switch where I was helping private landowners with their goals, small, to managing, 118,000 acres just here in Virginia, and having a lot more autonomy, and making a lot of decisions. A couple things that I'll tell you about my career. College helped me learn, and I'll tell you more about that later. But it helped me think about things different. I thought I had it all figured out. Then I learned a lot. The other thing, it just learned a lot from meeting people and making those connections, which have been incredibly important over the last 20 years. So never underestimate the friends you meet here on these, you know, CEE calls, in your classes, anywhere. Meet people, make good connections. But before we really get going, I want to put a poll up. If you could put the first poll up, please, Rachel. And basically, our first poll there is, do you think clear cutting is a good forest management practice? And we will let y'all ponder on that in a minute, and we will come to it. I can. There we go. So I'm going to talk about three kind of things in my presentation today. Basically, it's how to succeed in anything you do, but especially a STEM career, a career in the natural environment. Knowledge, communication, and passion. Okay, if nothing else, that's what you're going to need to have. Okay. I pulled this slide up. So this is right off of Weyerhaeuser's vision statement. And really what I think is important about this, because we are a large timber company, and a lot of people hear timber company and think it's what a terrible thing, but right in our vision, it says we manage the most sustainable, versatile resource on earth, forests. We are experts at using trees to make products people need, and this is the important part, we do it the right way, so our forests will last forever. We just celebrated our 125th year, and we didn't get there by being bad stewards of the land. I think it's really important, and that sustainability and sustainable is kind of a big deal. But what is sustainability? So I Googled it. I used the dictionary here. If you ask Merriam-Webster what sustainability is, the capable of being sustained. I love when they use the actual word to find a bigger word. Well, I can break the word down. Thank you. It's also of relating to or being a method of harvesting or using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. Okay, lots of big words. So I tried something different here. I'm a big fan of Copilot. This is the technology part of STEM is certainly broad in my book. I asked Copilot, one of the AIs, what sustainability was. Meeting current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own, right? Y'all are in high school. If, your parents, grandparents, all these old adults out here destroy something and you don't have access to, that's not cool. Sort of what they get into. But again, I'm a forester at heart, right? I am not a wordsmith. My definition of what sustainability is, and I think just a good way to think about this is trees today, trees tomorrow, and so much more, right? We want to use this resource. It's a renewable resource, but how do we manage it well? Because it's more than just the trees. It's the wildlife. It's the environment that those trees provide. The other thing is, I think it's important to realize solid forest management is designed not only to make money, right? So I work for a company. The reality is I've got to make money for the company. That's how this works. That's why I get paid. But the coolest part about my job and what we do is we can do it the right way and leave the environment even better and still make money. So getting paid for protecting the environment, doing it right is such a cool thing. And not easy. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And that's where it comes to that first thing I want to talk about is knowledge. And with knowledge, I don't know how to look at the results of the poll. Can you tell me the results of the poll or flash it on the screen for me?
Can you see
All
them at this point?
right.
Yeah, nice.
I can. Thank you. It popped up on my screen. Beautiful. All right, so we got about 33% that says clear cutting is not a good thing. 25% says it depends, and a majority of folks say I have no idea what clear cutting is. Cool. Well, let's talk about it a little bit. Um, so what is clear cutting? Clear cutting, when I talk about it, is the removal of all the trees from a given area. So I'm not talking about removal of thousands of acres. I usually think about this in a small scale setting. So if you think of a whole forest, like one little section and taking all the trees out is what I think about clear cutting. And I'll tell you a funny story. Remember how I said early on that I learned a lot in college? One of the first papers I wrote in college, I had to write an opinion paper about clear cutting. And I knew, I said, man, clear cutting is terrible. It destroys the environment. It's bad for the wildlife. It's bad for the water. And I wrote the paper. About a week later, I get my paper back. And my professor just lays into me and basically helps me understand I didn't have all the facts, right? He didn't disagree with what I said, but if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the facts, you don't know. So the folks who said it depends, that's awesome, right? If I go in and clear cut a whole 1,000 acres, leave nothing on the ground, yeah, I have probably done some damage to that environment. But here's a typical clear cut that you see on the screen here. So when I think about a clear cut, most of the time when I ask people, I say, what's wrong with the clear cut? Well, you've killed the habitat for the animals. They can't live anywhere. I didn't come up with this. As somebody pointed out to me and said, a clear cut's not really a destruction of their house. It's a remodel of a room. Every creature out there needs a different kind of habitat. And this is a clear cut. When done correctly, it's just a changing of the habitat a little bit, creation of a new type of habitat. So let's talk a little bit about what we see on the screen here. All right, let's see. My laser pointer. Oh, look at there, I got a laser pointer. So we have a deck or a landing. This is where they put the equipment to use to cut the trees and to haul the trees off. We set up all the equipment on these decks. So big area. How can that be good for the environment? Well, when we get done with that area, we'll seed it back in a pollinator mix, right? We'll put it back where the wildflowers will come and we'll have different habitat for there. I tell all my folks, I say, leave dead trees, leave green trees, leave snags out there. Folks say, well, that looks terrible. Why do I want to leave dead trees in the forest? Dead trees are great habitat for a variety of species. They protect species like red-headed woodpeckers, which is not endangered, but runs that risk of becoming endangered. So it's a great way to help protect at-risk species. It's also home for bats, raccoons, hawks, and bears, right? Leave some green trees out there. They produce future habitat for cavity nesters. So while I do cut most all the trees out there, we will leave, some trees standing for the different habitats, right? Riparian hardwood forest, that's a fancy way of saying trees around a riverbank, okay? I'm going to use some fancy words. It's just trees around a creek, but you can see these different animals that utilize this habitat. It's a change. I'm not going to mess with those trees around the creek. Clean water, I like clean water. Y'all like clean water. Trees are nature's Brita filter system, okay? So part of my job as an environmental manager, I got to protect the water. Because if I don't protect the water, then I get a lot of people mad at me. I don't have any business cutting any trees. I leave these buffers to protect the water, but then they also make great travel corridors for wildlife. They're great amphibian habitat. Different kind of habitat. if I polled everybody on what your favorite color was on this call, which I'm not going to do, by the way, I don't think everybody would say the same color. I like green myself, but everybody might like a different color. It's the same thing with, wildlife. Not all wildlife want old, mature forests. Not all wildlife want early forests, new forests. They want a variety. So one of the things I think about is creating this variety, right? By clear cutting these areas, I create early successional habitat. Again, a fancy way of saying a young forest with a lot of fresh growth, thick areas, lots of new growth, but a nice area for a lot of different species. And then the last thing I work with my contractors to do is leave piles of debris. And again, that just looks like it looks bad on the land. Hey, that is different structure. That's places for those rabbits to hide. That's places for bears to den up in the day, right? It's providing that habitat diversity. So when you guys are thinking about the science and technology and the environment, learn the science. Yes, clear cutting can be bad. If we clear cut the whole rainforest, there is going to be detrimental effects. That is not a good thing. A small patch clear cut of loblolly pine in the south can be done the right way and create new habitat, create a lot of different diversity for a different species, and still protect what we want in a forest. The great thing about a forest ecosystem too is just it grows back. It is a renewable natural resource. And I know you guys know that, but I think it's important to remember that a clear cut does not mean a Walmart. That's deforestation. So if you guys hear the word deforestation, that means no more forest. That means asphalt, something other than trees. That's kind of a problem. A clear cut just is a change in that forest cover type. We got rid of the trees. And by the way I make money is by selling the trees and planting more. I got to plant more so I can stay in business and I can still be here. So it's doing things right. And it's understanding the science of how things grow, how these species work, what trees come up first. Lots of science based in there. And then how wide of a buffer do I need to protect these creeks, right? What do I need to do to get the benefits that I want? And, what are your goals? What can you do to meet those goals? When I think of that as diversity on a stand level. So when I say stand, I just mean like a small forested level, okay? Blow that up, right? So right in here, this might be one little stand, this orange area. But all this is a chunk of land that we own in Virginia. So the different colors are different ages. So if I look at the forest that I own, you have this wide variety of colors. Why is that good? Well, I might have some young forest here, some older forest here, some middle-aged forest over here, a variety of age classes, something different. Over here, this is cover type. This is what species are growing out here. So you see a lot of green. Yeah, I grow pines. Okay, pines are like, they're a crop. So if you guys are farmers or think about growing corn, in the spring, the farmers plant the corn. In the fall, the farmers cut all the corn, and then you get your corn flakes. We all like corn flakes. You have to cut the corn to get the corn flakes. If we like wood products, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, we've got to cut the trees. Pines are a great crop because they grow quickly and I can regenerate them. But I don't want just loblolly pine trees on my land. So these purple colors and the red colors and these yellow colors are just other species, other cover types that exists to have that diversity on the land base. It's just so important to know what every species needs to have a difference. And again, solid forest management, kind of the science that I studied. I went to Virginia Tech. I studied forest resource management, how to grow trees in a sustainable way, basically. 4 years of that, so I could talk all night about forest management, and I love to do so. But solid forest management not only makes money, but also creates and maintains ideal habitat for a wide variety of species. I mean, it's just so. There we go. I figure out what makes my mouth move. I like this slide because when we think about the science, right, the knowledge involved in forestry, I got to think on a broad scale. If I look at the one tree and make a decision for one tree, that's not what's so helpful. I've got to make a decision for a broad scale. Here in this picture, you can see just the different habitats, a recently cut site. You have the buffers, you have the different age classes. All these trees are doing a multitude of things on the landscape. And man, I could go on and talk about this all day long, but I want to get to a few other things. But I just wanted to kind of show you the life cycle of a huge forest. So next, let's talk about communication. So it's really important to have the knowledge. Go to school, get the knowledge about what makes you passionate, okay? Gain that knowledge. I went to school to study trees. I learned all about the trees. What I didn't learn a lot about was communication. So I'll give you a little secret. A lot of foresters went to school because they wanted to go to the woods and be left alone and walk in the woods by themselves and not talk to anybody. What I quickly learned was there's like 2 forestry jobs in the whole world where you're going to be by yourself. Every other job within the industry, you have to communicate. You have to be good at communicating. So I think it's important. I'll give you an example here. I have some really good colleagues, really smart doctors that I work with in our environment, right? We have some scientists, biologists, doctoral folks, super smart. They want to talk to my forester, but when they go to talk and they're so passionate, but they go way over my forester's heads, I'm like, don't use all those scientific names. Just bring it down for us. Bring it down for us. They have the knowledge, they have the passion, but that communication is hard. So on that, let's go ahead and hit poll number 2. And this is kind of an open-ended question, so you get to flex your fingers a little bit here and do just a little typing. So I don't know how this will show up, but what sort of things do trees give us? I know that's kind of an open-ended question, but let's see. Throw a short answer in there. What are some things we get from trees? But communication is so important. What do I think of when I think of communication? So in my role as an environmental manager, I have to talk to a lot of people. On any given day, there's my passion right here. When I get to go out to the woods and talk to students or talk to students like I am now, that's my happy place, right? I can do that. I can tell corny jokes. I can ask you guys what a tree's favorite drink is. And I know you're all chomping at the bit to tell me a tree's favorite drink is root beer. And you'd be exactly right. I mean, it's just such a great thing to tell you. Unfortunately, I can't see your faces that are probably like rolling your eyes like, what a corny joke. And they only get worse, so I might not tell anymore. But maybe that same day, I have to talk to a bunch of landowners, right? And, that could be a variety of people. Um, Maybe the next day I have to go to Richmond or talk to a bunch of lawmakers and make that same message, right? I have to reach out to folks and say, what's this? Oh, and then I have to take the same message of environmental forestry and I've got to tell it to my loggers. I cannot say it the same way to the kids as I say to the loggers, as I say to the politicians, right? It's the same message. Forestry is good. Trees are good. Trees are great for the environment. But how I communicate that is is hard. Um, but I've got to change that message and be able to connect with a lot of different people in different ways. Um, but it's a fun part of my job. And let me give you a little example. Then we'll pull up the poll study here in a minute, just get the answers. But I want to give you a case study. So, had a really cool species right here. This is called the James spiny mussel. It's got these little spines on it. It is an endangered species. It is on this threatened and endangered species list. Um, just a species that will go extinct if we do not take care of it. It exists in some of our streams. So this is our property. We had this dam right here. I knew the species existed in the stream. We had it in our system, and I protected it, right? I told the foresters, I said, let's protect the water. These mussels need clean water, protect it, do good work. And they did. And I didn't think anything else of it. Funny enough, I was brought some folks out there and they said, well, you have a dam here. I'm like, yes, I do. And he said, well, that dam is terrible for the mussels. We got to get it out of there. I'm like, okay, but do you know how much money that's going to cost? He said, well, it's good for the environment. I said, do you know how much money that's going to cost? Blah, 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 blah. So we talked and we said, okay, we'll try to take it out. And it was one of the guys I worked with, Daniel. He said, well, I'll call some friends that I know and we'll see what we can't do. So he did. Back up 2 weeks. So the Department of Wildlife Resources, those are the folks here in Virginia that manage the wildlife. They started way upstream and they were in this stream looking for the James spiny mussel. And they were marching down the stream and they came across this dam. They had no idea the dam existed. I knew it existed. It was on my property. It was a nice place to go, put my feet in the water. They didn't know it existed. And they said, you know what? We got to figure out who owns this dam and see if we can take it out. So at the same time, Daniel was calling the Department of Wildlife Resources. They were trying to say, who owns this? And then we realized that we owned it. We wanted to take it out and they were excited. So it's going to be really cool. We wanted to take it out. They wanted us to take it out. Great. When I talked to the lady, she said, we could take it out, but it's going to cost about $50,000. I said, yeah, right. There is no way I'm going to be able to convince my company to spend $50,000. They don't mind spending money, but if there's no monetary return for us taking this dam out. But she said, well, I can get you some cost share, but it's going to take some money. So let me break this down for you guys real quick. Communication. I had to use my communication skills and goodwill that I had bought up, and I went to, our regional manager, one of the big bosses here, and said, Jocelyn, look, we have this dam up here, and I want to take it out. She said, okay, why? I said, hey, we got this really cool mussel. It's a rare endangered mussel that's hanging out in this water. She said, okay, so how are we going to pay for it? I'm like, well, Jocelyn, here's the deal. We can get some cost share, but we're still going to have to pay money out of our own pockets for this. She said, why should we do it? And I got to explain, about this mussel, about how if we take this dam out, we will open up so much more habitat for the mussel. I said, this is good for the environment. This is the right thing to do. And I think we should do it. And I had to use my communication skills, the goodwill that I brought up, the science that I had learned to talk to her, explain to her why this was the right thing to do, and get her buy off, because I wasn't the one who could stroke the check. But by using that communication skills, and she's like, "Hey, sounds like a good plan. I trust you." And we worked together. I worked with the state agencies. I said, "Hey, we need to get some cost share money. We need to do this." We got the dam taken out. One of the coolest days I had watching this dam being taken out. This is a before picture right over here on the left, and an after picture. It opened up new habitat, and we got to bring big machinery into the creek to tear that dam out. Now, if you're like me, and I'm going to geek out for a second, so please forgive me for geeking out. What does a mussel and a dam have in common here? Why is a dam blocking the mussel? Well, I never thought about how mussels move, but I talked to a mycologist, which is a really cool way of saying somebody who studies mussels. And he explained this to me. So adult mussels are pretty sedentary. They might get washed around in a really heavy stream, but they're pretty much stuck in the stream bed. But what they do, these adult mussels release their glochidia larvae. So it's basically like they're little babies. They shoot them up into the water, and they connect to these fish. And they sit there right in the gills of the fish where they grow. The fish is swimming around eating. These glochidia larvae are sitting there, using the fish as a host, eating its food. And when they get big enough, they're going to fall off and land somewhere new in the stream. So if you have a dam blocking the fish passage, the fish is basically like the mussel's bus. They're not going anywhere without a fish. So if I block the fish, the mussels are not going anywhere. So by breaking that dam open, I got to get to move the fish and create more habitat for the mussels. Now, here's the even cooler thing about mussels, guys, and forgive me, I love this stuff. These mussels create a lure, right? So while this looks like a little fish swimming right here, it is actually a mussel buried in the dirt. And you can see it's kind of like wiggling around. If I got any fisher folks out there who like to go fishing, same kind of concept. They got this lure. This lure's whole thing is to attract fish. And you guys can do a search for, mussels attracting fish, and you'll see, whole videos of these things and fish coming up to them. But they do this when the fish come by, they release their glochidia and they attach to the fish's gill. So this is how they attract them. So by opening the dam up, I created habitat for the fish, which in turn helped the mussels. But I was only able to get that done because we connected the science and the communication, right? I had to be able to communicate why this was a good thing, why we were going to spend this money. But let's see the result of those polls real quick. I'm curious.
Does it pop up the
You
finer
did not.
details on
I
your
know
end?
it didn't. It just says I didn't answer the question. I know I
Okay.
didn't answer the question. I was talking.
So I'll
Provide me
do
some answers that you're seeing.
I'll do a quick read through, but it's much as we've discussed before. We have oxygen, food, shade, moisture, building materials, medications, a good number of oxygen and clean air responses,
Yeah,
photosynthesis, resources, CO2, and climate tracer.
great. All all such good answers. There are so many products that come from the woods. And, the one that you guys didn't mention is money. And before you tell me that money comes from cotton, because I know it does, and you guys are way smarter than I am, I'm not talking about like the physical making of the money. In the state of Virginia, forestry is either the second or third, depending on how you look at the numbers, industry. It brings in, either the second or third most money to the state as a whole. That includes the harvesting of the trees, the landowners getting paid for the trees, the loggers. It is a huge industry. And that's our wood product. So it's so important to be able to communicate this well, because it's such a boon for the economy. Why do I have this slide up here? One thing I have learned is, if you're going to communicate anything, be it information about the forest, information about biology, information about whatever you guys get excited about, and find what you get excited about, you want a few short facts, right? People talk about your elevator pitch. Have your elevator pitch. Why should I care about trees? Well, and these are facts about Weyerhaeuser sustainability, but they're just as examples. Why do I care about Weyerhaeuser's trees? We supply over 1 million tons of wood fiber every year from our forests and mill residuals that are converted to bioenergy for renewable power. Renewable power, how cool is that? Just from growing the trees, cutting the trees, and regrowing the trees. Another cool fact, we work with 20 different conservation partners across the United States, right? I'm not going into all the partners. I have a short, quick fact that helps you sell your story, right? Why is STEM important to, this? If you're really into the technology, don't tune out, because we have nearly 100 science, research, and technicians across our company. And there's so much technology in forestry, whether you're in the woods or you're in the mills creating this little robot. This robot's called Spot, and he's designed to improve safety at the mills and be able to look around where people can't go. Little facts like this are so very important for clear communication. This is kind of why I asked the question. I'm always curious to see what people think. There's over 5,000 different things that we can create from wood, from paper to cardboard boxes, building materials, to toothpaste, to film, right? Just so many awesome things that come from wood. And once harvested, we're able to get them, right? It would be almost impossible to go a day without using a wood product. So when you're thinking about, your environmental, think about that communication. Think about a few fun facts that get people thinking. And then once you get them grabbed, then you have the conversation, right? You get them interested, then you can sell your point. Then you can tell them, hey, these are the mussels. This is why it's important. And, oh, Jocelyn, did you know that, mussels attach themselves to fish? What? Yeah. See, then I got them attracted, right? I got her attention, and we made it work. Communication, so very important. The last thing, and we'll get into more, I got a couple more case studies and other things, but I really want to just talk about the passion. If you haven't noticed, I do enjoy my job. I enjoy forestry. I have a passion for it. People often say, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, yeah, that's great. But I also like to say, if you enjoy what you do, you're going to do it well, and you're going to make a difference, right? Go out there, find what makes you guys happy, and do that 110%. Do it hard. If you want, throw poll question 3 up there, and it's going to be a little bit before I get to it, but you can go ahead and throw there. Okay, there. What would you like to do for a career? why I have this up. I'm curious to see where you guys are coming from, but I also want to help connect what you guys like into a natural environment kind of job, because the best thing about my job is I get to be in the woods every day. I get to be there, and everybody I work with does, but everybody I work with has a different passion, a different love, and different things they're good at. But let's let's talk about a day in the life of Andrew, the environmental manager, right? The love of the job is so important. Um, let's start right here in the middle. We got a great big dead tree with a lot of holes. Some people say, that's a safety hazard. You shouldn't be right there. I look at that and I say, hey, that's a buffet for all kinds of critters, whether it's insects, whether it's birds, whether it's whether it's animals that eat the insects, or there's animals that eat the birds. This is, things that I tell my loggers and my foresters to leave. Let's go back to that communication. We'll start at the knowledge. So what I've learned is this bird right here. This is a red-headed woodpecker. Again, a species in decline. What I mean by that, there are less and less of these birds in the environment. It's at risk of going onto the Endangered Species Act. That is not what I want to see happen to this bird. What I want to see happen to this bird is it to go up, 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 up. How do I do that? This bird will only live in dead snags. So whenever I do a harvest, I tell my loggers, leave those dead snags. Why? It just looks terrible. I'm like, hey, there's this really cool bird. You see that bird out there with that really red head and ivory chest? Oh, yeah. That bird's in decline. Let's leave it. Well, why? Well, either you can do it because I asked you to, or the government will tell us we have to. Which would you prefer? I figured out how to connect to them, right? And it's not just telling somebody to do something, but telling them the why. Right here we've got the gopher tortoise. Oh, this is not actually a gopher tortoise. This is a snapping turtle I saw out on my land. He's just really cool looking, so I had to put a picture of him there. The connections that you get to make. I have had a few very memorable days in the woods. I have a connection with a lady with the Department of Wildlife Resources, a lady I met in college 20 years ago. I started working with Weyerhaeuser about 10 years ago, and she called me up and said, Coach, I see you're working for Weyerhaeuser. I'm like, yeah, how you doing, Katie? It's been 10 years since we talked. She said, can I do some bear trapping on your property? Now, usually when people come to me and say, we want to use your property, I'm like, why? And I'm a little bit guarded because I don't know why they want to come on my property. I've got to be careful. But I knew Katie. I knew she was very forestry friendly, and I knew she was going to do good work. So I said, sure. We got an agreement. I said, you go trap bears. She wanted to put collars on bears so she could do research on them. So she did this for 3 or 4 years. And finally, one day I was talking to Katie. I said, Katie, look, we've been doing this for 4 years. Next time you get a bear, let me know because I want to come work a bear with you. I had never got to work with bears. I see them walking through the woods, but I never got to touch one. Not 30 minutes later, she called me up. She said, were you serious? I'm like, of course I was serious. She said, I've got one and I need help working it up. So I got in my truck and I rushed out to our woods. You can see our pine plantation behind us here. This mama bear, she was older, 12, 13 years old, had wandered into the trap. And it's a culvert trap. It's a safe trap where, no harm. We just was wanting to put a collar on her. And I got to work up this bear. It was so cool. I was pulling ticks off the bear. I was in heaven. Why? Because I have a really cool job. But 2, I had built those connections. I had the knowledge to know that she was good, what bears needed our habitat, and a communication with her. And I got to have one of the best days of my life working up a bear. It was so cool. Other thing about bears, people often think, Yogi Bear, they live in caves. That's where they hibernate. You have to have caves for bears. Well, here in central Virginia, I live in Appomattox, Virginia, kind of central part of the state, dead center. There are no caves. Okay, we have lots of bears, but we have no caves. So where do these bears stay? We were planting this tract. This is a big cutover, and if I could zoom out, I would. But this is just a cutover like we saw earlier. Tree planters called us up and said, "You need to come look at this." I went out and looked, and here Mama Bear was, different bear than this lady over here, but she had denned up for the winter right in our clear cut, right in here. And, you know, I got probably closer to her than I should have. She looked at me a couple times and moved, and I moved back really fast. But she didn't have any desire to bother me. I had no desire to bother her. But, you know, day in the life of Andrew is working with agencies and getting to protect our forest for the many things that live there, whether reptiles, birds, mammals, or insects. Get to protect these species. Part of my job is to help manage people to make sure our folks are ready. So I've got to share my knowledge with, so I do what we call environmental audits. I go out there and I put them through their paces. I say, show me what you're doing. Show me how you're protecting these species. And we get to see all kinds of cool things. You know, I have my people prepared. They're talking about what they do. I don't know if anybody has heard of the red cockaded woodpecker. That is an endangered or a threatened species, excuse me. That it's a fun species. It cannot use dead trees. It has to use live pine trees to live in. So we have a forest on our land that we manage just for those birds. And I get to go out and see, hey, are they doing it right? Are they managing it well? But I get to be a part of managing these species and managing these people to make sure that we are all rowing the boat the same way to leave the land better than we left it, right? And hey, look, if we got anybody out there who likes to play with fun toys, I love logging because it's just big boy toys, right? Or big toys, excuse me. Everybody likes big toys. So we'll start with this picture right here in the middle. This is what we call a loader. This is what basically gets all the trees, gets the limbs off, and get them ready to put on a pickup truck. So there's a log truck. You can see the log truck right here, called a loader. We do some prescribed burning. There are some species that need fire. Fire is an incredibly important part of the ecosystem. We got to put fire out there on the ecosystem. We used to have to carry like a big can of fuel, put a little wick on it, and throw fuel on the ground. Here we got to use a drone. Everybody likes drones. This is a drone that drops ping pong balls full of lighted fuel, and it flies over and drops them, lands on the ground for a little while, then it bursts into flame and it creates a fire. All great things. Over here on the left, this is some cool logging equipment in West Virginia where you have really steep slopes. Think 45-degree slopes. You know, that's a pretty sharp angle. What we have is like a big pulley system here that pulls up the logging equipment. And then I get to deal with issues. This is not what I want to see every day, but a day in the life of Andrew is managing problems, right? So sometimes we have boo-boos. This was an occasion over here where a hunt club decided to, stole the skidder, took it for a joyride, and dumped it in a creek. So then a forester calls me and says, Andrew, we're getting dirt in the creek, which is against the law. We have a great big piece of equipment and there's mud getting in the creek. What am I supposed to do? You know what they didn't teach me in school? How to deal with this. You're not going to learn everything in school. Learn how to think through a problem. I'm like, okay. Is everybody okay? Yeah. Okay. So what do we do? I thought through the problem and had to figure it out. Learn how to think. Don't just learn the knowledge, but learn how to think through a problem, because I guarantee you will never learn everything you need. You're going to have to think on the fly. Quick time check. Do you want me to give one more kind of policy thing here, Rachel, or?
Yeah, we can go
Let's get
ahead
right into
into
careers for
this.
a minute.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any questions yet in the Q&A, so we've got a bit of time. You can go ahead and go through this. And if anybody already had a question in their brain and they want to start typing so that we're kind of pre-prepped, you can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, throw me some questions. I love questions. Tell me something cool. But let's talk about the policy and procedure, right? I talked about the fun stuff. I do get to deal with government agencies, and I really do enjoy that as well. But again, have those connections. Why are those connections important? Let's talk about the Threatened and Endangered Species Act and how you, as STEM personnel in the environmental field, can help affect that. It's not just the politicians. So, in order to have a species be listed under the Threatened and Endangered Species Act, it goes through a monstrous process, which I will not talk about because I am not that well versed. But basically, it gets lots of reviews, and then they publish a rule that says this is what we think you should do. But the government writes these things, and then they send it out and say, how does this sound? Let's have some public comment. This was an example where there's a species right here called the Neuse River water dog. Really cool little salamander-like species, shows up in rivers in Virginia and North Carolina. It was getting listed. The problem was when I saw their comment period, they had put in some buffer rules that made no sense to me. They didn't make scientific sense. Why didn't they make scientific sense? Well, a politician wrote them who didn't know anything about science. They said, well, let's just say leave a 150-foot buffer to protect the species. Why 150 feet? Well, it's just better than 50. Well, what we went back to, I'm like, I want to protect the species, but all the science, right? The research that has been done says 50 feet works really well. And, if you go more than like 75 feet, it's just diminishing returns. You don't get much back from it, right? So you don't need this. So we worked with them, and we, as Weyerhaeuser, as other groups, provided feedback to the government and said, look, the states already have some policies in place. Why don't you just write this to say, follow the state policy for protecting water quality? Those have been shown to work. The science says they work. And then you don't have to come up with random numbers to do it. They blended like Virginia's BMP manual and North Carolina's, and they made some weird thing. And I'm like, no, use one thing, make your life easier. But that's where you got to take that science, right? And understand the policy, right? So you need to understand how species become threatened and what's involved and what happens once that species comes out. It could have adversely affected our timberland and not helped the wildlife species, right? I don't mind if it hurt us, if it protected the species, but it just was not any good for that species. I could tell you the same kind of stories and go into stuff for the gopher tortoise, the northern long-eared bat, but these are all species that we need good scientists, good people who understand these kind of things to protect the environment, to provide the scientific research, but also understand it on the ground, right? What is going on? How do I share the best knowledge and be able to communicate that so the right policies get put in place to protect it? But it's a cool success story because we are able to successfully work with these agencies through the petition process, through friendships we made, through connections we made. You can call them up and say, hi, so-and-so. Oh, I know you. We're friends. I don't have to introduce myself. Hey, I've read this Neuse River water dog policy. This is not going to work. Do you think, well, we might be able to, can we get it changed? Yeah, because I had those relationships. I had the science to back it up. It is so important. And people only do it because they care. If you don't care, then the rules are going to get changed. But it go ahead, can we pop up? You just tell me what some of the careers that some of our attendees are interested in.
Absolutely. So we had quite a number of people interested in engineering. I see aerospace engineering. We had a few people involved in mechanical engineering, physics. Let's see. I want to build emission inventories that guide effective policies, entrepreneurship,
Heck
healthcare.
yeah,
So a lot of
awesome,
good stuff. Yeah.
all kinds of good stuff, and do it. Engineering policies. It could all. Everybody is needed. In lots of industries. Find where you want to take that love, right? Love engineering, aerospace engineering. What part of aerospace engineering do you want to do? How do you want to make a change in the world? Because if y'all are like me, you're like, I want to do this because there's a because there. You want to be the first person to make it to Mars. Awesome. Do it. Hey, I want to change policy. How great is that? Learn the ways to adjust policy. But if you're interested in environmental policy, I would say, look, make some friends in the environmental world, right? Take a couple environmental classes, take a few biology classes so you can kind of communicate better with the people you need to influence. The better you can talk to folks and influence them, the better off you're going to be. And all kinds of careers. Um, you know, Technology is a huge thing, right? We are using more drones in our work. We are putting, from an engineering standpoint, we are trying to engineer ways for our logging equipment to work autonomously, right? How do I, from a safety standpoint, pull the person out of that equipment and let the computer do more of that work? Well, that takes a whole lot of programming. That takes development of new equipment. That takes research. That takes people on the ground. It takes all kinds of things. It's so, so interesting. Um, I'm going to pause. Do we have questions I can answer? I got a couple things I can say if there's not, but I do want to
No, absolutely. We got a
pause
couple of
here.
really excellent questions in the Q&A if we
Yeah,
want to get started with some of those.
sure. Love to.
All right. So Hector had a really great question. He says, "Do y'all ever run out of trees to cut? Like when waiting for the trees to reach the correct age for cutting, is there ever a long period of time where you're not able to cut any of the trees because they're not ready yet?"
Such a great question. And let me go back to those fast facts. We cut 2% of our forest every year on average. 2%. So we have some very incredible, intelligent data scientists, biometricians. Biometricians are, I call them magicians, right? They are mathematicians who can just model these things and make sure that we do not ever cut. So we don't just say, what are we going to cut tomorrow? What are we going to cut next year? What are we going to cut 5 years from now? The folks who do our models, Hector, model our forests out for 100 years. Okay? Let me put that in perspective. A loblolly pine stand grows for about 25, 30 years. We cut it, we grow it for 25, 30 years, we cut it again. We model out our forest for 100 years. That's like 3 rotations we're already planning on. And that's for every stand, which is a small parcel, every 50-acre, 100-acre block. We are growing that 3 times over in these plans. And we're redoing our plans every few years. So yeah, it's a big worry. Are we going to run out of trees? No, because we got some really smart people um, planning that out for us. And I'm not one of them. I can handle the trees in the woods, but I'm gonna let somebody else model how to do that. Great question. Thank you, Hector.
All right, awesome. And Jamal asked, have you ever worked with scientists of different backgrounds, even ones completely unrelated to forestry and the environment?
When I went to Tech, Virginia Tech has two sides of the campus. You have the more environmental side, and then you have the engineering side. And it's funny by like while your junior, senior year, you're like, I don't want to go to that side of campus because that's other folks. And while it's easy to stay in your little world, right? I could just talk to trees about tree people and they'll like what I have to say. And that's really good. But in my everyday stuff, I work with, different scientists, biologists, herpetologists, mycologists. Um, Honestly, I don't deal with engineers or other, chemists on a regular basis, but I need to. I think a good communicator will seek those folks out. What I often worry about is telling my story to other foresters is great, but that's like talking in an echo chamber. They all know forestry is great. It's harder to seek out those people who totally dislike what you're doing or totally think about it in a different way and work with them. But what I have found when I do find those people is once we get over, we're coming from different sides. If you explain what you're doing a little bit, you can learn a little bit more about why they're thinking and help them understand a little bit more about you. And most of the time, I find it's just a misunderstanding versus a true, you know, major disagreement. If we have disagreements, hey, that's fine. That's great. That makes the world go round, and I love it. And bring it on. And um, but do I deal with scientists outside of like natural resources? Not on a regular basis. I deal with more, sometimes it's politicians who are just not quite sure. But within the industry, we have within Weyerhaeuser, we have a lot of people who work in the mills that we have to talk to, and they know how to build the machines to take a tree and turn it into a 2x4. I have no idea how to do any of that, but I can help them understand how the wood got there, and they can understand what I need to do. But where the win is where we can connect. Because if they say, man, if I could have a straighter tree, I could make my mill run better. Why do you need a straighter tree? And they could show me, well, because this is where my bottleneck is and it slows down right here. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, then I show them how my trees grow and what I can do. And then we can find that happy medium. So look for those people and don't talk about why you guys disagree. Figure out where you can agree and how you can work together with each other.
Awesome. I love how, that kind of question loops into that communication, passion, knowledge piece that kind of brings it all together. So I think that's a great
Yeah.
summary of where we are. Now, Kieran, Monique, Talon, I love the questions in the Q&A. I'm going to include them in our email so that you can get the answers for those. We're running a little tight on time because there's another webinar for a different organization a little bit after this. So I want to make sure I'm good on time. So we are going to go ahead and finish up the summary and then we'll do our thank yous and move on to the next. So, Andrew, do you have any closing statements
Yeah.
you'd like to share?
Let me give you a few tips as you guys go out, learn all you can learn, okay? About a variety of things. If you love biological engineering, learn it, but learn about that chemical engineering just so you have an idea of what your friends are talking about. Seek out those opportunities, okay? Make connections in and out of school. You will be surprised how many people you're going to link up to in different fields and how important those things are. And last, man, do what makes you guys happy. Okay. If you're happy, things are going to be so much better. They really are. Do what makes you happy. Ride along, shadow people. If you're interested in the woods or just how trees grow, find a forester. You know, most states have Department of Forestry type folks. They'd love to meet you, love to show you around because people who love their job love to show it off. So find out about other jobs. Here's just a couple resources of other things if you guys want to know more about forestry and the environment. And
And I'll be able to send off
you're
these
certainly
links
welcome
too.
to share my email address. If anybody has any questions, they are more than happy to reach out to me directly.
Fabulous. For all y'all that are in here, and if you want to get to those resources, I'll email them off when we get the recording ready. So I'll put everything together in kind of a master post for you all. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna go
Of
ahead,
course.
y'all, and move into our final thank you. So, first of all, thank you all for being here and joining us for today. This was an awesome session. Thank you, Goat, for that great presentation. I was at the edge of my seat the whole time. I love fishing. I love the woods. So this was great for me, and I think everybody else appreciated it. Thank you to our sponsors. Without them, we would not be able to provide this programming to you free of cost. With them, we can do this with you once or twice a month for free. Woo! So thank you to all of our sponsors, especially the Cloudmore Charitable Foundation. That's it for us today, guys. Thank you so much.